I have been a drill master for 31 years. I have processed 11,412 recruits through Vehn Station's Garrison intake, which is the largest processing hub on the Hegemony's southern circuit. I have seen every shape that fear takes, the ones who go rigid on the parade ground, the ones who go loose, the ones who weep in the barracks and pretend the next morning they didn't. I have watched raw conscripts from 9 species walk through those gates, and I have filed on every one of them an honest assessment. Their ceiling, their temperament, their likely breakpoints under pressure. I am telling you all of this so you understand that I am not a sentimental person. I do not have favorites. I do not keep stories. I run a garrison and I run it the same way every morning. First light, parade ground, accountability, then the day's work. 31 years, the same shape, the same ground, the same voice carrying across the same stones. Vehn The Drath arrived on the 4th day of the 3rd rotation of the administrative year, on a standard transfer manifest from the Keth'aal border installation, which is 3 postings east of nowhere and 2 postings past the sort of place the Hegemony sends people it isn't sure what to do with. The manifest listed his species as human, his prior postings, 5, his duration at each, between 11 and 19 weeks, reason for transfer in each case, administrative reassignment. I read that manifest 3 times on the morning he arrived. 5 postings, no disciplinary record at any of them, no injuries sustained, no injuries caused, no documented failure of duty. Administrative reassignment every time, as though each installation had simply run out of reasons to keep him and also run out of reasons to send him anywhere specific, and had therefore pointed him at the next station on the list. I have seen soldiers transferred for cause. I have seen soldiers transferred for medical reasons. I have seen soldiers transferred because they were too good for their posting and needed to be somewhere with a higher ceiling. I had never, in 31 years, seen a soldier transferred 5 times with a clean record and no explanation beyond the administrative equivalent of a shrug. I went down to the intake bay to have a look. I want to be clear that this was unusual. I do not go to the intake bay for individual arrivals. I have a duty officer who processes arrivals, who has been doing it for 9 years, who is capable and thorough and has my complete confidence. The intake bay is a 40-meter walk from my office through 2 pressurized corridor sections and a security checkpoint, and I make that walk for inspections, for group intakes, for official delegation arrivals, and for no other reason. I made it for Vehn The Drath because 5 administrative reassignments with a clean record was something I had not encountered before, and because in 31 years I have learned that the things you have not encountered before are worth going to look at personally. He was sitting on a bench outside the processing office, not packing, not standing at attention, not studying the station layout the way most new assignments do when they arrive somewhere unfamiliar, that cataloging instinct, that inventory of exits and threats and power structures. He was sitting on the bench with his kit bag between his feet and his elbows on his knees, and he was eating something out of a paper wrapper that smelled, faintly, of the kind of savory paste that border world commissaries sell in bulk because it's cheap and it keeps. He was a compact man, not short, not tall, middle height, the kind of build that reads as ordinary until you look at the hands and realize there's actual use behind those proportions. Mid-40s, I estimated. Brown skin, darker at the forearms where the sun had done its work. A face that was, this is the only word I have for it, settled, not relaxed in the way of arrogance or indifference. Settled in the way of a man who had made peace with whatever the day was planning to bring him, and was content to wait and see. He looked up when I came around the corner, not startled. He registered me, the rank insignia on my shoulder plates, the color of my scales, and he nodded, the way a person nods when they're acknowledging that they've seen you and they have no immediate problem with your existence. Then he looked back at his food. I stood there for a moment. In 31 years, new assignments do not look at the Vehn Station drill master and then return calmly to their midday ration. They stand. They introduce themselves. They find something to do with their hands that demonstrates they are aware of the power differential and are managing it appropriately. Vehn The Drath folded the wrapper neatly, tucked it into the side pocket of his kit bag, and then looked back up at me with an expression that was patient and attentive and entirely without anxiety. "Rast," he said, Vehn reporting in. "Drillmaster Vole," I said. He nodded again, as though this confirmed something reasonable. I processed him myself, which I do not normally do. I had the duty officer pull every file the circuit had on him, not just the transfer manifests, but the internal assessments, the bunk notes, the performance evaluations. I read all of it in my office that afternoon while he was being assigned quarters and issued kit. This is what the file said. Keth'aal assigned to perimeter maintenance. Performance evaluation, adequate. Temperament, easy. Notable incidents, none. Reason for transfer, administrative reassignment. The signature on the transfer order belonged to the installation commander, a Colonel Vehn. No, Colonel Vehn The Drath. I read it again, and the transfer had been filed on week 11. Martin's post, assigned to supply coordination. Performance evaluation, above average. Temperament, easy. Notable incidents, during a containment breach of the station's auxiliary predator pen, they kept 3 armored Keth'aal for patrol. The human entered the pen to retrieve a piece of unsecured equipment, remained inside for approximately 4 minutes while the Keth'aal investigated him, and exited without injury when the equipment was secured. The station log noted this as an anomalous event with no follow-up action. Reason for transfer, administrative reassignment, filed on week 14. Orath Station, assigned to cargo logistics, Lower Bay. Performance evaluation, above average. Temperament, easy. Notable incident, during a loading dispute involving a contracted hauler's crew of 6 species unspecified, listed only as non-hegemony contractors. The human placed himself between the dispute and a hegemony junior officer without being ordered to and without drawing a weapon, and the dispute resolved without escalation. No charges filed. No commendation issued. Reason for transfer, administrative reassignment, filed on week 17. Calder's Reach installation, assigned to environmental maintenance. Performance evaluation, adequate. Notable incident, a vethral specimen. The notes described it as a quarantined 1.5 metric ton hexapodal pack predator newly acquired for study, broke containment for approximately 6 hours. The human was the technician on duty in the adjacent corridor. He reported the breach, and then, because the corridor was the only route to the ventilation control station, and the ventilation control station needed to be manually secured, he walked the corridor. The note said the vethral had pressed its entire weight against the corridor wall beside him and followed at a distance of approximately 3 meters until he reached the control station, secured the panel, and radioed for containment teams. No injury, no deviation from protocol. Reason for transfer, administrative reassignment, filed on week 19. Previous posting, Herath Logistics Hub, assigned to equipment tracking. Performance evaluation, satisfactory. Notable incident, the Drath ceremonial detachment attached to the hub, 4 honor guard reptilians, each approximately 2.7 meters, weight in excess of 400 kilograms, had been assessed as incompatible with a civilian logistics environment and were scheduled for reassignment to a military installation. During the week of their reassignment, 3 of the 4 refused to board the transport vehicle until the human came to the loading bay and stood near it. Station records noted this as anomalous without further analysis. Reason for transfer, administrative reassignment, filed on week 13. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. The Drath. Here was the detail that made every other file entry reorganize itself in my mind like a set of tiles falling into the correct pattern. I know the Drath. Vehn Station has 8 of them, the largest ceremonial honor guard detachment on the Southern Circuit. They were sent to us 3 years ago, because the installation that had them before couldn't manage them, and the installation before that couldn't manage them either. And before that there had been a documented incident I will not describe in full, except to say that the installation's commanding officer at the time had taken early retirement, and the species integration file had acquired 17 annotations. The Drath are armored reptilian predator warriors, bipedal, scaled in overlapping plates that run from dark green-gray at the crown to a deep bronze at the flanks. Ridge-crowned, a row of raised bony protrusions that run from the brow to the base of the skull and flex outward when they're reading a threat or establishing dominance, which gives them the appearance of a living siege weapon calibrating its aim. Amber eyes, slit-pupilled, with a binocular forward focus that evolved for tracking fast-moving prey across open terrain. 2.8 meters at full stand. Weight between 380 and 420 kilograms depending on the individual and the season. Bite force. I have read the documentation on this, and I will simply say that the documentation made me close the file and go for a walk. They are not domesticated. I want to be precise about this. The Drath are not domesticated any more than a thunderstorm is domesticated. They have been integrated into Hegemony ceremonial and military structures over the past 40 years because they are capable of complex instruction, because they are intensely hierarchical, and because an H-unit Drath honor formation is one of the most visually arresting things in the known Hegemony and carries a diplomatic weight that no amount of polished armor on ordinary soldiers can replicate. They follow a chain of command. They respond to ritual, to formal hierarchy, to the precise language of rank and status. They do not respond to people they have not decided to accept. 11 handlers in the history of the Southern Circuit's Drath integration program had failed to establish working authority with the Drath in their care. 3 of those failures had required medical intervention for the handler. None of the failures had involved fatalities, which the program documentation noted with what I read as relief rather than confidence. Vethara Station's 8 Drath were managed, technically, by a senior handler named Instructor Orvin, who had been in the role for 4 years, who had achieved what the program called a functional integration. They obeyed him, they participated in formations, they ate when and what he indicated, and who had told me privately, over a meal 3 months after his appointment, that he believed the Drath tolerated him in the same way a large body of water tolerates a small boat. Technically present on the surface, and fully capable of other arrangements. I did not share this assessment with my supervisors. I shared it with no one. I filed it in the part of my mind where I keep the things that are true but not useful to say out loud, and I went on running my Garrison. Now I sat in my office with Vehn The Drath's file on my desk, and I thought about 3 Drath at Hareth Logistics Hub who had refused to board a transport until a human stood near it. And I thought about a vethral specimen that had followed a human down a corridor for 6 hours and then sat beside the ventilation panel while he worked. And I thought about Keth'aal hounds investigating and withdrawing. And I thought about 5 administrative reassignments in clean succession. 5 postings that had found this man easy in temperament, above average or adequate in performance, and comprehensively impossible to explain. I put the file away. I assigned him to General Facilities Maintenance, which is honest work and keeps a person across every corner of a station. I scheduled him for standard integration, morning parade, physical assessment, station orientation, protocol briefing. I told myself I was being thorough, and not that I was keeping him somewhere I could observe him, which would not have been a professional rationale. The Drath integration yard is adjacent to the facility's maintenance corridor. This was not deliberate. It is simply the station's layout. The morning of his second full day, I was on the parade ground for first light accountability. Vehn The Drath was in the 3rd row, second from the left, standing in position with his hands at his sides and his eyes forward with the kind of unhurried attention that is not the same thing as military precision, but that produces similar results. He was not particularly tall in formation. He did not look particularly impressive. He looked like a man who was somewhere and was comfortable with being there. I called the formation through its paces. Standard assessment rotation, posture, response time, basic drill. He moved when he was supposed to move. He stopped when he was supposed to stop. He made no errors, generated no friction, produced no reason to look at him twice. I looked at him twice. After formation was dismissed, I walked back toward the command block. The integration yard's fence runs along the south wall of the parade ground, and as I passed it I registered, without fully processing it, that 2 of the Drath had come to the yard's fence and were standing at it, ridge crowns forward, amber eyes tracking something on the parade ground. I stopped. I turned. The parade ground was nearly empty by then. Most of the formation had filed off toward the morning meal. A few had peeled off toward duty stations. Vehn The Drath was still there, crouching by the drainage channel at the parade ground's eastern edge, doing something with a clog in the channel's grate with a tool from his kit pocket. He had probably noticed the blockage during formation and decided to clear it on his way past. The 2 Drath at the fence were watching him with the specific quality of attention that I have only seen the Drath deploy in 2 circumstances: when they are tracking prey, and when they are assessing something they have not yet categorized. He looked up at them once. He did not freeze. He did not make the particular movement that most people make when they look up and find 2 apex predator warriors at a fence 3 meters away. That involuntary recalibration of the whole body toward exit options. He registered them with the same nod he had given me at the intake bench. Then he looked back at the drain channel and continued working. I stood at the corner of the fence and watched this for 4 minutes. At the end of 4 minutes the drain was clear. Vehn The Drath had stood, pocketed his tool and walked toward the morning meal. The 2 Drath watched him go. Their ridge crowns were forward. Neither of them moved. I walked to the integration yard. Instructor Orvin was there, looking at the same 2 Drath with an expression that mixed professional concern with something I recognized as very carefully managed awe. "How long?" I asked. "Since they smelled the formation assembling," he said. "They've been at that fence since dawn formation. First time they've come to the fence for anything." "Both of them." 2 more in the yard, not at the fence yet, but oriented this way. I said nothing else. I walked back to my office. I filed nothing. The 3rd morning, 4 Drath at the fence. Vehn The Drath's work assignment brought him across the parade ground perimeter twice in the morning cycle. Both times they tracked him. Both times he nodded. I learned, from watching him move through the garrison over those first days, that Vehn The Drath had a quality I have since tried to name and have never quite managed to name adequately. It was not stillness. He moved, he worked, he covered ground efficiently. It was not indifference. He paid attention to things, genuine and consistent attention, the kind that gets the drain unclogged and the calibration node fixed right the first time because the person doing the work is actually looking at what is in front of them. The closest I can come to it is this: he was a man who was fully present in whatever was happening, and who did not appear to spend any portion of himself anticipating what might happen next, which left all of him available for what was actually occurring. Most people in garrison service, certainly, are partially elsewhere. Partially in the next thing, the last thing, the thing they are worried about, the evaluation coming up, the transfer they hope for or fear. Vehn The Drath appeared to be entirely in the current thing, every time. The Drath could read this, I believe, in the same way they could read threat and submission and dominance from the way a body moves. They were reading something that had no threat in it and no submission in it either, and they were reading it as a consistent signal, morning after morning, through the fence. They did not have a filing for it. I do not think they needed one. I think they simply kept coming to the fence because whatever they were reading was real, and real things are worth attending to. He nodded at the Drath at the fence. He nodded at the station's mechanical systems when they responded to his attention correctly, with a small adjustment of the wrench or the calibration tool. the quiet acknowledgement of a person who has made peace with inanimate objects. He nodded at the morning, when the station's lights shifted from sleep cycle amber to operational white. He was a man who was in agreement with his surroundings, in a constant low-grade way, and who made this known through small gestures of recognition. On the fifth morning, I arrived at the parade ground before first light to find 6 Drath at the integration yard fence. Instructor Orvin was there already. We stood together in the pre-dawn quiet and looked at them. "He hasn't gone near them," Orvin said. "Not on purpose. His work route doesn't bring him to the integration yard." "I know. They smell him from across the station, I think. The parade ground is close enough that they catch his scent during formation." "I know. Drill master, what do you want me to do?" I thought about it. I thought about a vethral specimen pressing its weight against a corridor wall and following a man with a calibration tool. I thought about Keth'aal hounds withdrawing from an investigation with the quiet of things that have decided. I thought about 3 Drath refusing a transport until a human stood near the loading bay. "Nothing," I said. "Let it be, document it." He documented it. I have those documents. They are, in aggregate, the most unusual behavioral record in the Drath integration program's 40-year history, and I kept them in a file marked Administrative Integration Assessment, which is bureaucratic language for I am not ready to explain this yet. On the 8th day, I changed Vehn The Drath's work assignment. This was not an experiment. I want to be clear about that, because afterwards several people implied that I had planned it, that I had engineered what followed, and I had not. I changed his assignment because the integration yard's water reclamation system had been cycling irregularly for 2 weeks, and my facilities technician with the appropriate expertise had been transferred out in the previous rotation, and Vehn The Drath's file included a notation from Calder's Reach that he had maintained environmental systems, which are adjacent disciplines. And because the integration yard water system needed to be fixed, and I had someone who could probably fix it. That is the honest account. I tell you this because I have told it many times and I have always been asked whether I knew what would happen, and the answer is no. I knew what might happen, in the way that a person who understands how water flows knows that a pipe under pressure will eventually find its release. I had not engineered the pressure. I had only put the pipe where I could see it. Instructor Orvin met me at the integration yard gate at the start of the work shift, with a look on his face that I had never seen on him before, and that I would describe as a man consciously deciding not to be afraid. "They know he's coming," Orvin said. "I don't know how. The assignment wasn't posted anywhere they have access to, but they've been at the interior fence since before dawn." The interior fence is not the fence that runs along the parade ground. The interior fence is the inner perimeter of the integration yard, the boundary between the general maintenance access area and the enclosed space where the Drath eat, rest, and conduct their training drills. It is reinforced. It exists because the Drath are not domesticated. All 8 of them were at the interior fence when we came through the gate. 8 Drath in formation is, as I said, one of the most visually arresting things in the known hegemony. They had not formed up deliberately. They were arrayed in a rough arc, the way animals array when they are collectively orienting on something they have not categorized. But the effect was nonetheless something that pressed on a person's chest from the inside and made the breathing go careful and measured. Ridge crowns forward on all 8. Amber eyes forward. 400-kilogram bodies angled toward the gate. Vehn The Drath came through the gate behind me, carrying a maintenance kit. He looked at them. They looked at him. He nodded that small, complete, unhurried nod of recognition, and then he walked across the yard toward the water reclamation housing on the far wall, because that is where the broken system was and he had a job to do. I will describe what happened in the only way I know how to describe it, which is as directly as I can. The Drath moved. Not toward him, not away from him. They redistributed slowly and in complete silence across the interior of their enclosure, and when they finished redistributing, they were arranged in a configuration that I can only call a watching formation, spread along the fence line of the interior enclosure, facing the direction of the water reclamation housing, ridge crowned still forward, amber eyes tracking. They did not crowd the interior fence. They gave him space. They were watching the way that very old things watch, with an attention that has no urgency in it because whatever they are watching is not going anywhere and they know it. Vehn Drath opened the access panel on the water reclamation housing. He looked at the mechanism inside. He reached in with a calibration tool, traced something with his fingertip, made a small sound that I could not hear from where I stood, but that Orvin described to me later as a sound of mild professional interest, like a man confirming a suspicion he had wanted to verify. The largest of the Drath, a female, I believed, though the program documentation on Drath reproductive biology is incomplete, had come to the interior fence, not pushing against it, standing at it. Her ridge crown had deployed to its full lateral extension, which the documentation describes as a dominance display, but which I have come to think from 4 years of observation, is better understood as a full attention signal, the Drath equivalent of bringing your eyes into focus. She was watching him work. He worked for 3.5 hours. I know this because I stayed. I told myself I was conducting a supervisory observation, and I was also just staying, because 31 years in the Hegemony Garrison system had not prepared me for what I was watching, and I could not make myself leave. During those 3.5 hours, he identified the fault in the reclamation system, which turned out to be a sequential failure in 2 of the filter calibration nodes rather than the primary pump issue we had assumed. He repaired the first node. He took a break to eat, sitting on a crate near the access panel with his kit bag beside him and his paper-wrapped ration in his hands. 3 of the Drath had moved to the interior fence section nearest to the crate. He looked at them while he ate, not starring, just the periodic, comfortable attention of a man sharing space with something he has no quarrel with. After a moment he looked back at his food. One of the Drath, young, I thought, the ridge crown narrower and less calcified than the older ones, pressed its snout briefly against the interior fence mesh. Not testing it, just contact. The way a thing makes contact when it is verifying that what it senses is real. Vehn Drath looked up. He looked at the young Drath with the snout on the mesh. He nodded. The Drath pulled its snout back from the mesh and stood still. He finished his ration, folded the wrapper, pocketed it, and went back to the second calibration node. He finished the repair at midday. He ran the reclamation system through a full test cycle, confirmed the output pressures, noted the readings in his maintenance log, and repacked his kit. He picked up his bag. He turned toward the gate. All 8 Drath had come to the interior fence. They were not packed against it. They were arrayed along it, evenly spaced, ridge crowns deployed, amber eyes forward. He walked toward the gate. As he passed along the fence line, he slowed, not stopped, just slowed, the pace of a man who is politely acknowledging something in passing, and he looked at each of them in turn. Brief, direct, the same quality of attention he had given the drain channel and the calibration nodes and the morning light. And then he walked through the gate. Instructor Orvin closed the gate. We stood on the outside of it, and neither of us said anything for a moment. "What does that mean?" Orvin said eventually. He meant it genuinely. He had 4 years with the Drath, and he had seen everything they were capable of, and he was asking me, his drill master. What it meant that 8 of them had spent 3.5 hours in a collective watching formation, around an ordinary man, repairing a water pump. "I don't know yet," I said, which was honest. I had a shape forming in my mind, the outline of an understanding, but the understanding was large enough that I wasn't ready to name it. Some things need to be watched longer before you can say what they are. I put him on the integration yard maintenance rotation permanently. He fixed 4 other systems over the following 2 weeks, a lighting array, a feed dispensary calibration, the locking mechanism on a secondary access gate, a drainage line. Every time he came into the yard, the Drath formed up around the interior fence. Every time he left, they tracked him to the gate. On the third week, the young Drath I had noticed, the one who had pressed its snout to the mesh, was waiting at the access gate when Vehn Rast arrived. Not the interior fence. The access gate, which is the gate that opens from the outer yard into the general maintenance access corridor where he walked. Orvin and I were both there. We looked at the young Drath at the access gate. We looked at each other. "The lock," Orvin said carefully, "is on the inside. She can't open it. She can't have opened it." "I know," I said. "So she's just standing there." "Yes." Vehn Rast looked at the young Drath through the gate mesh. The young Drath looked back at him. He reached into his kit bag, took out his maintenance log to check the day's work schedule, noted something in it, and put it back. He did this naturally, the way a person does a routine task, while the 2.5-meter predator warrior on the other side of the gate watched him with its full lateral ridge crown deployed, and its amber eyes doing the focused forward thing that the documentation calls predator tracking mode. He put the log away. He looked at her again. "Morning," he said. She made a sound. I have 47 acoustic files of Drath vocalizations in my records, and not one of them matches what she produced in that moment. It was low, in the chest, without threat, without the harmonic overtone that indicates arousal or aggression. Orvin told me later it was the sound the youngest Drath made when they were fed something they found particularly satisfying. I do not know if that is the correct category. I know that she made it, and then she stepped back from the gate and turned and walked to the center of the integration yard, and stood there and waited while Orvin unlocked the gate and Vehn Rast came through to do his work. His name in the Garrison records was still Vehn Rast, facilities technician, general rotation, status, administrative transfer pending review. Pending review because the Admiral's office had by this point sent us a query. Not an unusual query, routine circuit audit, standardized format, inquiry into the human status and disposition and projected posting. The 6th installation had a staffing gap and had filed a preliminary request. I replied to the query with a brief message stating that the transfer review was ongoing and that the human's current assignment was essential to active infrastructure maintenance and could not be disrupted without operational impact. This was true. I had made it true by putting him on the maintenance rotation. I am aware of that. I am telling you anyway. What happened in the 4th week was not something I arranged. I want to say that clearly before I describe it. Vethara Station's integration yard has 2 gates. The inner gate, which I have described, opens from the outer maintenance corridor into the general yard. The outer gate is the gate through which the Drath are formally led on parade days. The ceremonial gate, large enough for the full formation, with the station's insignia worked into the arch above it. On parade days, Instructor Orvin leads the Drath out through the outer gate, across a short causeway, to the main parade ground, where they take their position as the station's honor formation. The 4th week of Vehn Rast's maintenance rotation fell during a parade week. I had not thought about the proximity of the schedule. I had not thought about what happens when a Drath formation is in motion across a causeway and can smell, from the parade ground, the specific human they have spent 4 weeks orienting toward. I was on the parade ground when it happened. The full Garrison formation was assembled. I was at the command position. The station's deputy commander, Colonel Vehn The Drath, was present for the mid-month inspection, a routine visit, nothing significant, the kind of visit that generates paperwork and a shared midday meal. Colonel Drath was standing at the reviewing position to my left. Instructor Orvin brought the Drath through the outer ceremonial gate. The 8 of them moved across the causeway in their standard parade formation, 2 columns of 4, ridge crowns neutral, pace measured. They moved beautifully. I want to say that clearly too. The Drath in formal parade formation are genuinely, operatically beautiful in the way that only things that could kill you effortlessly and have chosen not to are ever beautiful. The garrison always went quiet when they moved. They came through onto the parade ground. Orvin led them to the honor position to the left of the reviewing dais facing the formation. Standard placement. They had done it dozens of times. They did not stop at the honor position. Orvin stopped. He said the halt command. 4 of them stopped. The other 4, the large female who had first come to the interior fence, the young one with the narrow ridge crown, and 2 others from the oldest cohort continued walking. Not at speed, not threatening. Walking with that measured predator pace that covers ground deceptively quickly, across the parade ground toward the 3rd row of the assembled garrison. I will tell you that in the ensuing 30 seconds there was no screaming. There was a sound, a collective held breath, across 400 assembled personnel, that was louder than screaming in its way, because it came from everyone at once and said the same thing. We do not know what is happening, and we are extremely attentive to whatever comes next. Vehn Drath was in the 3rd row, 2nd from the left. The large female stopped in front of him. 2.8 meters of armored, ridge-crowned, amber-eyed predator warrior, which had not been brought to any halt command and had not been asked for any of this, stopped in front of an ordinary man standing in formation with a maintenance kit clipped to his belt and his hands at his sides. She was taller than him by a significant margin. She looked down at him. Her ridge crown was at full lateral extension. Her amber eyes were doing the full focus forward thing. He looked up at her. He did not step back. He did not bring his hands up. He looked up at her the way he looked at calibration panels and drain channels and the morning light, directly, with attention, with no particular urgency about the outcome. She lowered her head. Not a bow, not a submission gesture, not any of the 17 Drath submission postures described in the program documentation. A different thing. She lowered her head until her jaw was level with his, and she held it there, and the ridge crown deployed fully outward and then, slowly, in a way I had not seen in 4 years, folded back, folded in. The way the Drath fold their crowns when they are in the presence of something they have decided is, I do not have the species word for it, so I will use the word we used afterward, which is the closest translation anyone could find, already home. The young Drath moved to his left. One of the older ones moved to his right. The 4th arranged itself behind him. 4 Drath, with the 4 that had obeyed the halt command now breaking their own position and following, formed up in a configuration around a facilities maintenance technician in the 3rd row of a parade ground assembly. They were in parade formation, not the honor formation for the dais. The ceremonial forward-facing salute formation, the one they used when they were being formally presented to a superior. They formed it around Vehn Drath. 400 personnel watched. Colonel Drath watched. Instructor Orvin watched from the place he had stopped when they left him. I watched. Vehn Drath stood in the center of 8 Drath in ceremonial formation and looked at the large female in front of him, who had folded her ridge crown in. And he did the thing that, when people ask me about it afterward, is the thing they find hardest to believe. He nodded. Not the small nod of casual acknowledgement. A real nod, slow, complete, the kind of nod that means I see you and I understand and we are in agreement. The kind of nod that a person gives when something important has been confirmed. Then he looked forward. The way a person looks forward when they are standing in formation and are waiting for the assembly to proceed. I do not know what I said next. I have a recording from the station's assembly documentation system, and on the recording I can hear my own voice, and what I said was the next command in the parade ground sequence. The command to stand at ease, and my voice on the recording sounds exactly the same as it sounds every other morning of the past 31 years. I do not know how. I genuinely do not know how I did that. The formation stood at ease. The Drath around Vehn Drath stood at ease, in the same motion as the garrison, as though they had been part of the assembly the whole time. Colonel Drath said after a moment, "Drill Master Vole." Colonel, I said, is this a standard procedure? No, I said. There was a pause. Should I understand what I've just seen? I thought about it. I thought about the drain channel and the maintenance log and the paper-wrapped ration and the nod at the young Drath's snout on the fence mesh. I thought about 5 installation commanders who had filed administrative reassignments because they didn't know where else to put a man who generated no problems, violated no protocols, and caused inexplicable things to happen around apex predators. I thought about the shape that had been forming in my mind for 4 weeks, the outline of an understanding I had not been ready to name. I was ready to name it now. The Drath are hierarchy readers, I said, at an instinctive level before cognition. They read dominance signals, threat signals, submission signals, attention signals. They read what a creature is, what category it belongs to, from the way it moves and holds itself and responds to its environment. Yes, Colonel Orath said, that's in the integration literature. They've been reading him since he arrived. 5 installations did the same thing, read him, could not categorize him, filed a transfer because they didn't know what to do with something that didn't fit the categories they had. The Drath don't have a transfer protocol. They have a different protocol. Which is? Recognition, I said. Orath looked at the parade ground. At Vehn Rast, standing in formation with 8 Drath arranged around him in ceremonial presentation, looking forward, waiting for the next command. Recognition of what? They don't recognize him as one of them, I said. They recognize him as something that is what they are in a different form, a thing that is not troubled by danger because it has understood at a level below thought that danger is a condition of the world and not a reason to change what you're doing. The Drath are like that. They have always been like that. They've spent 40 years trying to find something in hegemony service structures that is also like that, and instead finding handlers who manage them and commanding officers who file documentation and integration programs that treat them like a problem to be administered. I paused, and then he walked into the integration yard, I said, to fix the water pump. Orath was quiet for a moment. He looked at the parade ground. He looked at me. The Admiral's office filed a transfer request, he said. I know. I'll need to respond to it. I know, I said. What should I tell them? I looked at the parade ground. At Vehn Rast, standing with the Drath around him in ceremonial formation, in the way that a person stands when they are somewhere they have been before and are comfortable with being again. His hands at his sides, his eyes forward, waiting for the day's work. I thought about what the young Drath had done at the access gate. That small sound low in the chest, without threat. The sound that Orvin said was the one the youngest Drath made when they were given something they found particularly satisfying. Tell them, I said, that the Vethara Station Drath integration has achieved a new operational milestone, and that the human specialist instrumental to that milestone is essential to ongoing Garrison function and cannot be transferred at this time or in the foreseeable future. Orath considered this. That's a defensible filing. Yes, I said. And if the Admiral pushes back? I looked at the 8 Drath around Vehn Rast. At the large female, ridge crown folded in, amber eyes forward, standing in her position in the ceremonial formation, the way a foundation stone stands in a wall, not because anything is making her, but because this is where she has placed herself, and she sees no reason for any other arrangement. Then the Admiral is welcome to come to Vethara Station, I said, and explain to the Drath Integration's senior formation that the specialist has been reassigned. Orath looked at the parade ground for a long time. I'll file the milestone report, he said. He did. I have a copy. It is 3 pages of precise administrative language describing enhanced Drath integration outcomes, improved formation compliance, and unprecedented voluntary parade alignment, and it contains no mention of a man eating his midday ration on a crate while an armored predator warrior pressed its snout to a fence mesh beside him. Some things are in the record and some things are in the understanding, and they are not always the same set. The sector admiral did not visit Vethara Station. He sent a query, which Orath answered with the milestone report and a formal request that the transfer be suspended pending evaluation. The admiral suspended it. This process took 11 days and generated 47 messages across the circuit administrative system, none of which Vehn Rast was aware of, because nobody told him and he did not ask. I thought about telling him. I came close once when I passed him in the facility's corridor, and he was marking something in his maintenance log with the focused, unhurried attention he brought to everything, and I stopped and thought about saying, "The Admiral's office wanted to move you, and I have filed 4 extensions, and the Drath integration specialist has submitted research recommendations, and there are currently 47 administrative messages in the circuit system that are in some sense about you, though none of them would be recognizable as such to anyone who didn't know what they were about." I said, "The water main coupling in the eastern block." He looked up, corroding at the secondary joint. "I've got the part ordered, should have it by end of week." "Good," I said. I went back to my office. Some conversations are better had in the record. Some are better had nowhere at all. He fixed a ventilation housing on the eastern block, recalibrated the mess hall's environmental control system, and replaced a corroded coupling in the secondary water main. He ate his midday ration on whatever surface was convenient. He nodded at things. The Drath integration yard had a formal review scheduled for the end of the quarter, a standard program assessment, conducted by a Hegemony integration specialist from the central office, the kind of review that produces a score on a standardized rubric and goes into the program's annual report. The central office specialist arrived 3 weeks after the parade ground incident. I briefed her before she went in. I told her about the maintenance rotation, about the fence line formations, about the parade ground alignment. I told her in the same voice I use for all administrative briefings, factual, precise, without interpretation. She took notes. She had a practiced expression of careful professional neutrality that told me she was deciding whether to be skeptical or concerned, and that she had not yet finished deciding. Then she went into the integration yard. Instructor Orvin led the Drath through their standard assessment sequence. They performed every element correctly: formation, command response, the formal hierarchy displays, the assessment challenges. They performed it, if I am being precise, better than they had performed any prior assessment in the 4 years of Vethara Station's program record. Their compliance index, the standardized score, was the highest recorded for any Drath integration site on the circuit in the program's history. Vehn Rast was doing routine maintenance on the feed dispensary calibration unit in the far corner of the yard. The specialist stood at the yard's observation rail with her notes and watched the Drath move through their assessment with their ridge crowns at operational neutral and their amber eyes forward. And she watched the large female break formation briefly at the midpoint of the sequence to walk the full length of the yard and stand next to the feed dispensary unit for approximately 40 seconds. And she watched Vehn Rast look up from the dispensary calibration, acknowledge the large female with a nod, and continue working. And she watched the large female return to the formation. The specialist did not break stride. She wrote in her notes for a moment. She looked up. "How long has this integration arrangement been in place?" she said. 7 weeks, I said. "And prior to this assignment, the integration's compliance index was functional," I said, "not exceptional." She wrote something else. She looked at the large female, back in formation, ridge crown at operational neutral, moving through the remaining assessment elements with the other 7. "What is the formal title of his role in the integration structure?" the specialist said. "Facilities technician, general maintenance rotation," I said. She considered this. "That's not an integration role." "No," I said. "He has no formal integration credentials." "No. He hasn't been trained in Drath behavioral protocols, command language, hierarchy display conventions, any of the standard handler curriculum. He has not, I said. She wrote for a while. She looked at the yard. I'm going to need to create a new category in the assessment rubric, she said, in the tone of someone who is talking to themselves and who does not entirely mean to be. I understand, I said. The report she filed used language I found precise and interesting. Enhanced ambient integration, meaning integration that proceeds through environmental presence rather than formal command authority. The Drath, she wrote, had achieved an unprecedented compliance profile and formation quality under the influence of an environmental factor she categorized as passive hierarchy recognition, a dynamic in which the subject's natural behavioral baseline is read by the Drath as belonging to a recognized apex category, generating voluntary alignment without formal handler interaction. She noted, in a separate paragraph, that this dynamic had not been observed before in 40 years of program records. She recommended that the station's integration arrangement be maintained without modification, and that the relevant case materials be submitted to the program's research division for further study. She did not recommend that Vehn Rast receive any new title or formal role in the integration structure. I thought about this for a while. I think she was right not to. Some things do not get better for being categorized. I spent 3 evenings reading the program's 40 years of research documentation after her visit. All of it. The early integration attempts, the failed handler placements, the annotated incident files, the long theoretical section on Drath hierarchy cognition that 4 generations of program specialists had contributed to and which was thorough and serious, and which had, reading it now, the quality of people describing the shape of a room from outside the room, precise about what they could observe, careful about what they could not, and entirely missing the one thing that would have organized everything else. The thing they were missing was that the Drath were not primarily responding to authority. They were primarily responding to what a thing was. Authority was legible to them. Hierarchy, command structure, formal dominance display, they understood all of it. They operated within it. But underneath that cognition, at the level that ran before the cognition, they were reading something else, something older. Something that had nothing to do with rank or protocol, or the 47 subcategories of handler certification in the program's training manual. 40 years of program documentation had not named it because the program had never produced it. They had gotten closer at some postings than others. There was one handler, 22 years ago at a Northern Circuit installation, whose assessment notes I read 3 times. A veteran named Instructor Vel Ashen, who had written, in an informal addendum to her final rotation report, the Drath in this formation know the difference between a person who is not afraid, because they have trained themselves not to show fear, and a person who is not afraid, because they genuinely do not have the fear that the situation would seem to call for. The latter are extremely rare. In 3 rotations I have found one other person with this quality, and she was 11 years old and the station commander's daughter, who used to visit the yard on rest days. Instructor Ashen had retired the following year. No one had followed up on the addendum. It sat in the file for 22 years and said what it said and waited. Here is what I want to tell you. Not the official record, not the assessment rubric language. What I want to tell you is what I saw on an ordinary morning in the 6th week of his maintenance rotation, which is something that was not in any formation and was not documented, and which I did not put in any report. He was crossing the parade ground at midday, between the water main work and the afternoon calibration run. It was the quiet part of the station day, most of the garrison at the midday meal, the parade ground empty, the integration yard in its rest period, the Drath somewhere in the enclosure going about whatever the Drath do in the hours when no one is running assessments. The large female was at the integration yard fence. The outer fence, the parade ground fence, I don't know how long she had been there. I was in my office and I had come out onto the command block steps for some air, and I looked across the parade ground and there she was. Vehn The Drath was crossing the parade ground. He saw her. He angled his course slightly, not toward the fence, just a degree or two in that direction, the way you angle towards something when you have decided to acknowledge it as you pass. He came level with the fence. He stopped. They looked at each other through the mesh. He was not particularly tall. She was 2.8 meters of ancient predator architecture, ridge-crowned, amber-eyed, scaled in layered bronze-green plates that carried, in the right light, the faint iridescence of something that had been built for a world where nothing was casual and everything mattered. She looked at him through the fence with that full-attention stillness that was not the same thing as calm but produced similar results, a quality of complete presence, nothing divided, nothing withheld. He put one hand against the fence mesh. She lowered her jaw until it was level with his hand. She did not press against the mesh. She brought herself level with it, the way the young one had brought her snout to the mesh in the early days, with the quality of verification. This is real, this is here, I have checked. She held it there. He left his hand where it was. I don't know how long they stood like that. I didn't time it. I stood on the steps of the command block and I watched two things recognize each other across a fence, and I thought about 31 years of processing 11,000 people through a garrison, and I thought about the file that said administrative reassignment 5 times, as though the Hegemony's entire circuit had simply not known what shelf to put him on. The Hegemony is very good at shelves. It is organized around them. Species type, service classification, aptitude tier, assignment category, everything has a shelf, and the system functions because everything stays on its shelf and can be located when needed. This is not a criticism. The system works. I have spent 31 years making it work on a small scale at a single station, and I believe in it. But there are things, occasionally, that will not be shelved. Not because they are against the rules, not because they are difficult or dangerous or willfully non-compliant. Because they are what they are, at a level below the categories, and the categories do not reach that deep. The Drath know this. It is what the Drath read when they read a thing, not its category but what it actually is. And what they found in Vehn The Drath of the border world posting and the paper-wrapped midday ration and the nod that meant I see you and we are in agreement was something they recognized. Not as Drath, not as handler, as a kind of thing that the universe only makes occasionally and that, when it makes it, the Drath have a name for. I do not have the species word. I only have the translation, which is approximate at best. It means, roughly, the one who is not moved, not unmoved in the sense of indifference, unmoved in the sense of a stone in a river that the water has been flowing around for so long that the water has stopped trying to move it and has learned instead to go around it, and the stone has become, over time, a feature of the river, a fixed point that everything else orients by. He is still here. That is the simple fact of it. He has been at Vehn station for 14 months now. His transfer is still technically pending review. I have submitted the review extension 4 times. Each time, the extension has been granted because Colonel Orath files the supporting documentation, and the supporting documentation is now 47 pages of enhanced integration metrics, and a program research recommendation, and a compliance index that is the highest ever recorded in the Southern Circuit. He continues the maintenance rotation. The water systems are in better condition than they have been in my tenure at the station. The Drath's integration assessment scores have not returned to their prior level. They have settled at a point approximately 30% above the functional baseline, which the specialist's report attributes to sustained ambient integration dynamics, and which I attribute to the fact that they know where he is, and they know he'll be back in the morning. And that knowing has organized something in them that the handler training manuals had not been able to organize in 40 years. There is a thing that happens at first light formation now. It is not in the protocol. It is not documented because I have not documented it, because some things are in the understanding and not in the record. When the assembly forms and instructor Orvin brings the Drath to the honor position, the young one, the one with the narrow ridge crown, the one who made the sound at the gate, will locate Vehn Rast in the formation and hold that position for the first 60 seconds of assembly. Not breaking formation, not moving toward him, just knowing where he is. And then Vehn Rast will, in those 60 seconds, look once in the direction of the honor position and nod. And the young Drath's ridge crown will fold in, just for a moment. And then she'll be at operational neutral and the assembly will proceed and nothing will have been disrupted and nothing will have been put on a shelf. I have been a drill master for 31 years. I have processed 11,412 recruits. I have filed assessments on all of them. On Vehn Rast's formal assessment in the section marked temperament I have written, easy. It is the same word every installation before me used. It is the correct word. It is also, I have come to understand, not even close to adequate, the way that calling the Drath beautiful is correct and not even close to adequate. There are things that the right words point toward without reaching. You file what you can and you keep the understanding somewhere else. His assessment also has a notation in the section marked Notable Integration Outcomes that reads, see attached program research file, 14 volumes ongoing. The 14 volumes contain a great deal of precise language. They do not contain what I saw through the window of the command block on an ordinary quiet midday, through the fence mesh, between a man with a calibration tool and a 2.8-meter predator warrior, who had folded her ridge crown in and brought herself level with his hand. Some things you keep for yourself. This one I kept. I am telling it now because I am 31 years into a career that has given me very few moments where I was certain, without any institutional language to fall back on, that I was seeing something true. That was one of them. He finished his midday that day, the way he finishes every midday, folded the wrapper, pocketed it, picked up the kit bag, walked toward the afternoon's work. She watched him go. Her ridge crown stayed folded in until he was through the eastern corridor door and out of sight. Then she walked back to the center of the integration yard and stood where she stands, which is the same place she always stands now, facing east, toward the corridor that brings him back in the morning. She was still there when the lights shifted from operational white to evening amber. She was there again when they shifted back.